Hello, welcome everyone, and welcome to Super Monday, where we have a strengths-based coffee chat. Today is a very, very special episode because, as you can see, I'm surrounded by men. This is the very first time that we're doing a strengths forum, and the conversation today is men with the strength of compassion. Now, Super Monday is an opportunity for you to learn how to use science-based strategies to tap on your prevalent and innate character strengths to be the leader that you are at home, at work, and most importantly, in your life. So the reason why we are having this conversation piece today is because sometimes I am accused of being biased to only taking care of the well-being and the flourishing of women. So there you are. This forum is especially dedicated to men for their well-being and for their flourishing. And I'm not going to do it by myself. I have, as you can see, very important men who will share this conversation with me. And also in my coaching conversations with men, I have started to observe that compassion is in particular, self-compassion is a challenge, actually not just for women, it's for men as well. So I think that this is a much needed conversation in society. So let's explore this deeper and nurture a more compassionate space in society, starting with ourselves. So here I have with me, firstly, we have KAVIN, who is the director of SuperPact that provides a positive psychology training and psychotherapy services. He's also the first he for she ambassador for She Network. And we have Alil, which is the president of the Ostomy Association of Singapore and a twice cancer survivor. And he is also a he for she ambassador for She Network. And we have Mervyn, who is a psychotherapist and an educational consultant for the School of Positive Psychology, and he is also a he for she ambassador for She Network. And last but not least, we have Jeffro, who is a performance coach. He helps professionals to be effective people managers and leaders via coaching and training. So please help me to welcome our gentlemen as I unmute them. Hello, boys.
Hi everyone, good to be here.
Yeah.
Hello,
Well,
everyone.
I have to say this feels very surreal to me. I'm not used to being surrounded by masculine energy. I was more used to things being the other way around. But it's also because of conversations that I have heard also from KAVIN with Julie, a strengths profile coach, and Jeffro, our another episode of Strengths Based Coffee Chat where compassion came into place. That this inspired and sparked this conversation. So I think let's go dive straight into it. So, gentlemen, what does compassion as a strength means to you? I'm really curious. For men, does it mean the same thing as women?
Well, let me take the lead here. I don't know whether there's any difference between men and women when it comes to compassion itself. I think this particular topic for me is just easily said as showing concern, and more often we know compassion as showing concern and care to others. I think the other side, we should also look at it as showing concern and care to ourselves. How do we use this as strengths? We know at workplaces or generally in the workforce out there, people just come on and take stress, like as if you're going into a battlefield. So people will go in and wear a suit of armor, so they tend to be strong. Uh, Having that said, we also have, I mean, quite a number of people also have this idea that it should generally be like this when it comes to professional work. And what I feel that, when it comes to compassion is also to understand that everyone that we're working with are humans. And as humans, we have emotions and we have changes throughout the day when we start, what we go throughout the day, and by the time we get back home. It's to understand that we have emotional changes and that we have so many triggers around us, especially at this time of year. There's so many things that's happening globally and also at home. I feel that it's just really good to take a time to care and show concern on other people. And that, for me, if you use compassion as a strength, will really help you shine as a leader, help you shine as a person of compassion. So that's my take on it.
And I think that Jeffro, compassion is your unrealized strength and strengths profile. That's why we had quite a bit of conversation around it, right? It was actually your unrealized strength. And so, what have happened since the last conversation where you make this realization? I really need to work on this strength. So, where are you right now?
Well, I haven't taken an updated test on it, but as of the last, what I realized is, in terms of strength, like I mentioned, we often show compassion to others, and for myself, it's much easier to show compassion to others, to understand what they feel, and to work around things that help them in a positive way or in an encouraging manner. What I realized is I should also be using that, or I could use that for myself, and I don't know about others, but I'm guilty of being in a moment where I just want to go heads on onto things, and sometimes I just put on a smile regardless of how hard it is. And I realize that I tend to push aside the emotions. As much as I preach that we should appreciate it, sometimes I feel that being in the moment itself, it's so easy to just park it aside and then just do what you do. And doing this, what I realize is when I spend more time with myself, trying to understand what's going on the inside, acknowledging what's happening, how I feel, how I look like. And I realized I became a little bit more kinder to myself. And what I mean by that is I realized that, I actually needed some break, not just that 5 minutes or 10 minutes break that we talk about, but sometimes we just need a one whole day for ourselves. Just sit down and do the things that matters to us, whether it's just watching a movie, cleaning the things up, or just taking a walk. It's up to you, whichever pick. For me, it's just taking my mind off work, completely zone out, not even brainstorming or anything, and just do something in that moment itself. Or some of my friends would call it being mindful. And what I realized is, things got better. I felt genuinely more happy and joyful as well in that sense. And yeah, according to the strengths profile, that when you use more of this, you start seeing a shift. And that's what I've been experiencing so far.
Thanks for sharing. And guys, what are your thoughts? Are you having the same experiences?
I think I don't know whether because usually until I met Joy, I did not know the science behind all this, right? So yes, and strangely enough, when I looked at my strengths profile, compassion isn't there. Okay, so well, there's kindness, there is gratitude and stuff like, but there's no compassion. So maybe I should retake the test. But so the two self compassion, I think, is something that maybe I should try and be more mindful of, because I get caught up in lots of stuff. I mean, I really enjoy what I'm doing on a lot of fronts. And sometimes I get really, really busy, right? So I've got this calendar which gets filled up really fast. And yeah, and I love the idea that Jeff talked about, taking that one day to just not even do any brainstorming and take a complete day off from everything. I think I've reached a stage where that could be useful for me. But compassion generally, I think in the work that I do with other patients as a patient advocate, then compassion plays a big part. Because you need to have walked that journey that the patient that you are befriending has walked or is going through right now. And I think it goes hand in hand with empathy as well. And you can't put yourself in their shoes until you take off your own shoes first. Mm-hmm. Right? So what usually happens is sometimes we get over our difficulty, we get over the shock and the should I say the gravity of the situation we are in, being diagnosed with one or two cancers. You know what I'm saying? And we think that that is how everyone else is going to be, but that is really very far from the truth. everyone is wired differently. Everyone takes their own time in coming to terms with what the situation they find themselves in. And to be able to understand that and engage with that patient, bearing that in mind is so important. To really sit down with them and be where they are, rather than trying to tell them that, look, look at me, I've done this, and I've got things that are more condition that's more serious than you, and I've come out of it like this, and that is really, really unfair. Number one, to that person, and I think this is where I feel that compassion is so important in the work that I do. Yeah.
So, guys, how exactly does your relationship with self-compassion looks like? Like, is it a very foreign concept for you, or you actually have this intimate relationship with self-compassion?
That's a good question, though. Should
Uh,
hear
I
from
would-
Ravi.
Yeah,
Mavi?
I would think that it's actually quite alien to a lot of people, especially because of our social cultural conditioning since young. Especially in Asian cultures, which tends to be heavily critical. Um, why are you so stupid? Why you do things so wrong? Why are you not smart enough? Why are you not smart like your cousin? All these kind of things it's a very Asian thing, and so I guess for Asian men in particular, this concept of self-compassion is something that we need to learn. It's something we need to
Yes.
learn, and not just men. I mean, it's across the board women as well. So and you grow up through this childhood where you're always constantly criticized, and then eventually you internalize it and you become very self-critical. And every time something goes wrong, you start asking that voice, that you heard in your childhood. It becomes that inner voice that you hear. So it actually takes a lot of effort, not just for men but also women, to actually overcome that critical conditioning that we have been given since young. And it actually takes a lot of effort for us to develop that sense of self-compassion. In fact, recently I actually did a talk for the migrant workers who were stuck in the dormitories during COVID-19, which are still undergoing technically. So I was invited to be part of this series, and my subject was actually about self-care and self-compassion, and the difference between the two. So one is more of an action. So we actually talk a lot about self-care in our society today, but I think the self-compassion concept still needs time to take root. Because if you don't have self-compassion, it's very hard to do self-care. How to care for something that you do not have compassion for. And so it's really about doing versus thinking. Self-care is the doing, but the doing comes from the thinking. And in the talk I also mentioned about how to develop self-compassion, and it's a little bit of a cognitive exercise where we kind of externalize ourselves, where we think of ourselves as our best friend, and how would you then treat that person? Because we tend to be nicer to people than to ourselves, right? So it's more of an exercise of how do we internalize that kind of love and compassion that we would have for others, and then it gradually builds from there. But yeah, like I said, even in therapy work and all that, especially people with depression and all that, they are very, very highly critical. I mean, whenever anyone talks about the topic of compassion, the very first person that comes to my mind is Christine Neff, who has done a lot of research in this area. Yeah, so it talks about the three main components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness, which which was mentioned earlier as well. And so all these are something that we need to develop, especially as men, where there's this hyper masculine kind of mentality that men are supposed to behave or think and all that, and that compassion is weakness, which I think is wrong. It's wrong. Compassion isn't weakness. Compassion actually takes courage. It takes courage to be compassionate, not just to other people, but to ourselves as well. Yeah.
So when Mervyn was sharing that, in our culture, we are kind of taught that compassion is a kind of weakness, and I see all the nodding heads. We are all our guests here. So what's with the nodding heads, and Kevin?
Well, I think I grew up with a father who was loving in his own way, but he had the stiff upper lip kind of manliness about him as a father. My grandparents on both sides didn't help in terms of breaking that strong and silent mold. So growing up, I think one of the things that we get programmed with is that it's cool if you care about other people and you show it, but it may not be so cool to actually be soft and gentle on yourself. That was the innate message that I felt I got as I grew up. And later on in adult life, then we start having, I noticed that I started having conflicting points of view. It was a lot easier to be caring towards others, but it's a lot easier to be critical of myself. So later on, when I had to go through a very painful divorce, I think one of the things that I really struggled with was finding compassion for myself, and that was really quite a major struggle. It was going through a divorce is already painful. Becoming a single father is already a very painful process. But what really didn't help was the fact at the initial stages of the separation and divorce and becoming a single parent, I was highly, highly critical of myself. And I think sometimes I felt I was just at the precipice of just going bonkers, losing it, going to depression, really just teetering at that balancing point. And if it weren't for family, friends, and prayer, I think I would have just gone over the other side very easily and just lost myself in that world of self-centeredness, self-defeating thinking process. So, as Mervyn was sharing, I think as men we have a bit of a handicap when it comes to self-compassion. We have probably very little issue with caring for others, showing that we care for others. But when it comes to ourselves, the man in the mirror tends to be our number one enemy. And also friend. Depends how we look at the mirror.
Any thoughts, Ali, Jeffro?
Well, I concur with the views that is being shared by Mervyn and Kevin as well. And I think one of the systems that we've been accustomed to, generally as I grew up, is watching TV and you see all the manly figures. None of them show any emotions. The superheroes are always strong, are always smiling, are always manly. But yeah, you've never seen a superhero that talks about emotions and about self-care and that you should take a break. There was never a time. And even in today's society where you see superheroes being shown, the ones that we could relate to are the ones that are suffering, but the ones that sort of distance ourselves is those that has no weakness at all, like the imbalanced one. We only say yay, but we can never connect with that. And that's why it kind of shows where we are as a society, that we understand, even men, women, all alike, we have emotions and we do suffer. And especially for people who have goals, who have drives, to get things done and to make a better life, we tend to set a higher standards for ourselves. And with that being said, we are also hypercritical with the things that we do. And I generally found this in a lot of high achievers whom I've talked with, whom I've managed to connect with. I realized that they have this gold standard that is nearly impossible to hit. They're like, I need to be this, X amount of money or X amount of achievements within this period of time. And you look at it and you see the way that they're going, it's really pushing boundaries. I'm happy that they do that. I'm also afraid that, if they constantly just go on a turbocharger, like a car that never brakes at all, one day that brake will become a breakdown. Yeah.
Welcome back, Elio.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I just got off the screen. We took some time off for self-compassion.
Oh my gosh.
Very spontaneous.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify what Jeffrey was saying. It's a very fine line between breaking down and breakdancing.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's a heavy topic, even myself included. I feel that I'm also still learning in this area, and there's so much to explore. There's so many things that's not taught, that I feel that could be beneficial to a lot of men in terms of grooming, self-image, the care, basically how to be human as well, as we tend to try and match up to the superheroes of the world. As a little boy, like I said, I grew up to watching all these superhero movies, and every one of them just looks so good that I want to model that. But in modeling that, I also forget that I'm not a superhero per se, blessed with some superhero powers. The ones that I do have are human powers that could be super, if I knew how to use them more.
Wow, that's a beautiful statement, Jeffro. That's a beautiful statement. Wow. And I really love your observation and highlighting the fact that I think this is a very important observation that as a society, we tend to celebrate superhero or male characters that they're very cool, they don't show any expression, they're very strong, they just keep everything inside and they just show up, deliver, execute, and then they go back into their cave and everybody's like, wow, so cool, right? And that's what kind of message are we sending with that? But then you see it in almost every movie. That's like the stereotype of what it means to be a man, a good man, a strong man, all the positive connotation with a characteristic of a man like that. I think that's really the pressure I can appreciate is like really high for men. So what I'm curious about is what are your self-compassion challenge, or what are those that you have observed in men in general that they struggle with a certain piece of self-compassion, especially Mervyn, when you do counseling for your male clients, what are the struggles in terms of self-compassion?
I would say the first primary challenge is vulnerability, the ability to open up and to be authentic in our sharing. Like what Kevin just did just now was very, very authentic, where he talked about his struggles with the divorce and becoming a single father. That actually takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, so to really admit that yes, I'm having all these negative emotions, I'm having a negative experience, or I'm having a tough time. That one is the very first barrier already and yeah, that's why I actually tend to prefer working with female clients sometimes. For women, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to cry, it's okay to talk about all these things. But for men, there's always this facade that you need to break down first, before you can even get to the core of what the real problem is and all. They'll be acting all fine or to be angry. And then they always say men have anger management issues, but I really feel no, it's not anger management, it's because there's no other valid emotion that men are allowed to feel. You cannot cry, 男子汉大丈夫流血不流泪, which is like guys can bleed lah, but you cannot cry lah, and all. So there's all this conditioning that we have already gone through for most of our lives, and much less compassion, even vulnerability to say I'm having a hard time, I'm very tired, I'm sad, even something as simple as I'm sad. There's this comment, in fact, I shared on Facebook recently about how when you're young, we are all very emotional, and then after that someone's like always telling you you're not supposed to feel, you're not supposed to express, right? So we harden our hearts, we ignore our emotions, and then what happens? We get angry. In fact, there was this time I was very privileged to be invited to this group. It was a support group for violent men, or violent men. They were all under PPO, for enacting violence on their family members and all these. And the reason why I was invited was because my friend was inside. He told me about it. I spoke with a social worker who runs the group and everything. And they were celebrating because my friend and a few others, they were being so-called, they were graduating from a course where they were supposed to become the elder brothers of the next batch of men who go in there. And it was such a lovely experience going there, listening to these men talk. And these are men with violent tendencies who have beaten people up and all that. And they were saying how they were so struggling to be vulnerable, to talk about their problems and all that. And And it was amazing to see the transformation. These are men with drinking issues, with violence issues, and they have become such loving husbands and fathers after giving this of going through this experience of being supported by other men, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to be compassionate to themselves. I was very moved when I listened to their sharing, and in particular, there was this guy who's quite elderly, and he was sharing how he went all the counseling places because he wanted someone, just anyone, to help him, and he couldn't find that help until finally he came to this group where and he was sharing how nobody teaches you how to be a man. You know, you don't get a textbook, you don't get an instruction manual. You are just supposed to figure it out, and then you don't get taught how to be a husband. You don't get taught how to be a boyfriend. You don't get taught how to be a father. You know, and that's why men are having so many problems that we don't have all these things, and yet we are supposed to be strong, like what we were talking about superheroes, this facade that we create, that we have to live, and is there any surprise that suicide, 71% of them in Singapore are executed by men? You know, because we're so efficient, right? When we want to kill ourselves, we are very, very good at it. You know,
We
men
make
are.
sure it happens.
Yeah, we make sure it happens exactly. Performance, right? Hey, you want to do it, you better do a good job. Don't do 6:30 and then you survive, and then later on people come and like, hey, you know, like kind of thing. And it's just tragic, the hyper masculinity that's actually killing men. You know.
So I
So
think
I
I
guess
like. Sorry,
yes,
go ahead, Joy.
Elio.
Yeah.
Um,
I was
I,
saying
I,
that.
Elio, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. What struck me was what Mervin just said about there's no manual, there's no instruction manual, and I think we have a lighthearted moment now, and we can talk about efficiency and men having like higher rate of suicide and all that. But it's a real issue, and it's only now that we are coming out and recognizing this, that we are not having self-compassion, and that is the cause of these issues, depression, men taking their own lives. And I'm involved in this movement called Movember. Every November, we keep our beards and mustache just to raise awareness. One of male cancers, but the other one is a male mental illness. All right, and it is also aimed at getting men to open up more, to speak to someone. Just call up a friend and talk to them, rather than bottling it all up in. It's because again, there's no manual that we can turn to. And I had a personal experience when after I was diagnosed, and I was already having grappling with a number of issues, and my sister was visiting from India, and she was staying with my mom, my late mom, in her flat. And then I always came across to my mom as the son who could like take care of everything. And at that time, I think I had not told her about my condition yet, because she herself was not in very good health. And then here she was telling, "Oh, your sister has this, has that. Can you arrange for this and that?" And I was already buckling under the burden that I was. And I hadn't told her yet. Of course, she didn't know. It wasn't her fault, Uh, and that actually made me sit down with her and talk to her, and that is when I really opened up and told her what I'm going through right now, and these are things that at this point in time I will not be unable to take on anymore. And I had to be frank with her, because I needed to make her understand. All right. So if it wasn't for that opportunity, I may not have found the right occasion to tell her what I was going through, and I was so glad I did it, because she then became one of my strongest pillars of support.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, must have been a very scary but necessary bold thing that you had to do, and you were able to reap the benefits from opening up, especially to your mom. I think opening up to our moms is something. It's always a different level if we have that opportunity. I have a question I wanted to ask Mervin, because I've always felt a bit self-conscious during my separation and my divorce, there were at that breaking point. There were many moments where I actually broke down and I actually cried.
Mm.
You know, so I have this stereotype thought in my head. Do correct me if I'm wrong, Mervyn, because you have interfaced with many other men.
Mm.
Men, I perceive, have always have this ugly cry. You know, when men cry and when women cry, it's two different things altogether.
You obviously
Men,
have not been watching Korean dramas, Javed.
you know, before I had my separation and my divorce, yeah, it would have stayed in the movie world, you know. But when I had to go through it myself, it was like during that moment I was like, damn it, don't cry, you know. But I was really breaking down, so I cried. But at the same time, I was trying to hold back my tears. So it turns out to be this really ugly cry, you know. Trying to cry but not crying, withholding,
Yeah.
trying to look macho, not macho. Everything looks horrible compared to, say, the beauty, if I may, of a woman crying and pouring out her heart. What do you think, Mervyn? Just tapping your thoughts on that.
Okay, that sounds a bit strange. How exactly would you define an ugly cry? Is there such a thing as beautiful crying versus ugly crying? I mean, crying, ultimately to me, crying is a function, right? It's a function and it's cathartic. It's a catharsis of negative emotions and all that, and it brings a lot of relief. And it's a natural process of grief where you lose your marriage, you lose your identity as a husband back then, and then you are forming a new identity as a divorcee and a single father. You were, I believe, going through a sense of deep grief for the lost marriage and everything. I mean, it's very complex, right? Divorce is very complex. There's a lot of things involved down there, and I don't know. And you say the ugly cry, like you said, maybe half of you was like, no, I don't want to cry. The other half is, yes, I want to cry. And then that's why it ends up like this monstrosity of sobbing yet not sobbing. I really don't know. I haven't seen you. Maybe next time you demonstrate for us. What you define as an ugly cry, all right? I mean, to me, at the end of the day, as a therapist, I would not define a cry as ugly or beautiful, but to me, it's always the tears have a message and they're trying to express something that we could not express with words. So to me, I think tears are a very beautiful thing at the end of the day. It's our way, it's our body's way of saying something that our mouth or our voice can't. Yeah.
And I think we need more practice because we don't cry enough. So,
That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what woman beautiful cry. What they're like that. Sniff a bit and then rub the eye a bit like that. No, but
Okay, I allow me to
Demonstrate?
simulate or demonstrate. Okay. So this is me trying to help other men. So I show what I think is a guy trying to hold back his tears, but having no choice but to, because the emotions are just overwhelming. So typically it goes something like this, lah, right? Oh gosh, can't believe I'm doing this live. More like you. The kind of thing you're trying to hold back, and whereas a woman would be like pouring it out, it's just a continuous flow, but a guy would stutter, stammer, choke, and just the breathing goes really havoc, yeah, kind of thing, because it's sometimes feels unbecoming of a man to cry, something like that. I think those are the feelings I felt at that breakdown.
Yeah.
I guess I mean for myself, I can echo on that. As a boy growing up, I was always told, boys don't cry, men don't even shed a tear. Like I think someone mentioned about you can bleed, but you can't cry. Like crying is a sign of weakness, and hence that little message has just stuck with me for a very long time. And even in the recent years as well, to get used to crying was such a difficult thing. Like I could go and push the car, it's still easier than crying. lifting
Yes.
trying to lift a ton of weight, it's still way better than trying to cry. And well, Kevin just did a wonderful thing in showing men 101 on how to cry. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I can be a role model for that, Jeffro.
But I thought you did pretty well because it looked quite authentic, and I've seen like I think you are born to be an actor because that was exactly how the guys do it in the K dramas, you know. Yeah, but having said that, jokes aside, I think also sometimes there's so much pent up feelings in us, except especially after major incident in our lives, that I find that on a few occasions when you're all alone and suddenly you hear a song which triggers the outpouring of emotions, and you really just have you are alone and you just let go, right? This has happened a couple of times. Because you're alone, you don't really you're not self-conscious anymore, and everything just comes out, you know. Yeah, and I guess it is sad that it has to be like that, where we find times like that, then we think that that's okay if we cry, and not like as and when you are overcome with the emotion and then you just let loose your feelings, right? So how do you, is there something that you can do to make that happen as a therapist? Do you encourage like men to just express themselves as and when they are overcome by these feelings, or is there help?
Yeah, I mean that's a very, very good question. At the end of the day, these emotions, the expression of it, it has to serve some sort of function and purpose, right? It's not just expressing it for the sake of expressing it, but rather sometimes our emotions are just down there trying to tell us something, like we're sad or in fact, anger is a umbrella emotion. It's not actually a primary emotion. It's a cover for other emotions. Many times when we feel angry, it's because we feel like someone has insulted us, or has crossed our boundaries, or has done something that threatens our values and all these kind of things. So very often when people are angry, men are angry, men and women the same. The anger is always an umbrella emotion that's actually hiding something down there. And also even the sadness, the tears, and all these sort of things. What are the emotions trying to tell you? What is going on that you are feeling these emotions? So ultimately, there is emotional self mastery. In fact, I want to bring up the point that it's not just men who get castigated or whatever for crying. Women do so as well. I have observed it in women where they're not being allowed to cry. I had this client whose husband passed away. It was a very shocking death from pneumonia. And she told me how the relatives absolutely refused to let her cry throughout the entire funeral and all that. And that in the therapy room with me was the actual first time she could actually cry without being judged, without being told that it's wrong to cry and all these kind of things. And that catharsis itself actually brought a lot of improvement to her well-being, kind of thing. But once again, it shouldn't be just express emotions for the sake of expressing it, but rather, why are we feeling these emotions? What are they trying to tell us? Is something wrong? Is there something that we need to look at or to fix in our life? That kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just the Asians, and once again the Asian thing. We're not very good with emotions, right? We're supposed to be stoic. Even happy, you're not supposed to yay and all these kind of things. People are like, you crazy or what, that kind of thing. Right? And so
We're not too expressive.
yeah, it's just like they were saying the difference between an American therapist versus an Asian therapist. You go to American, hi, how are you doing today? Nice to meet you, and all that kind of thing. But then if Asian therapists do that, people will be like, oh, you're so unprofessional. That kind of
Very
thing.
extra.
Yeah. So our emotional intelligence is actually really quite bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with how it is at home. I find that a lot of families, especially working members, parents don't go back and talk about feelings at home. And because of that, their children grow up not talking about feelings, and that just goes from one generation to another generation, repeated. We want to hear that things are going well. If it's not going well, what's your plan to rectify that? So it's always in that logical, rational thing to get things going, but never in a moment where if I'm facing a challenge, can I just say that I'm being frustrated, that I need help, that I just want to vent things out. That's it. Like, I want to spend this next 15 minutes. I don't want to talk about solutions. I don't want to talk about how life can be better and all that. I just want to say how frustrated I am and how I'm not getting things done. And that's about it. That moment itself, I find to be missing. And I know because I'm in that shoe for majority of my life, that I come back, I want to say something, but I never found that right atmosphere, that right environment to do so. And I just penned it up. Okay, no, I'll just talk to myself in the room, sometimes with my pillow.
All right.
Yeah.
And I hear you, Jeffro. And not just that, also the flip side, we don't celebrate things either, right? Like, let's say if you go home and you're like, hey, this really awesome thing happened at work today, and then the partner or whoever, like, what's the big deal? Or something like that. And you say, like, and yeah, I mean, we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to grow as a society when it comes to this kind of healthy emotional communication that we have with one another. I mean, I try to do that with my kids, when they tell me something, and then I'll just try to be more expressive, and if it's something to celebrate, I'll try to celebrate with them and all that kind of, or if it's something you don't feel nice about, then empathize with them. I think that goes a really long way, and building healthier children also.
It is. And just to add into that, Marvin, and for like Kevin, Elil, and Joy, let me know what your thoughts is. I find that if we're gonna do, or we're gonna build up compassion, whether as a practice that we have with our friends, or as a general culture to be practiced as a whole, it doesn't quite work as in I do now and then next month everyone starts practicing it. I feel that whatever that we do now is only going to be a foundation or building blocks for the next generation. Like, this is where we start. That's where everyone sort of get the awareness and sort of like get testing on the waters and stuff. And then by the time it actually materializes, it's the next generation, and they feel like, okay, so this is probably the way it should be. And then they do it, and then it cascades down to the further generations. Yeah, but that's probably my sentiment on really working on this. We got to know that it's not instant. That even if we start practicing all those self-care tips that we find on the internet, the 101 things that we do, if we do all that 101, it doesn't make us self-compassionate experts in the next month.
So what I'm hearing is that I think that we should take personal responsibility, isn't it, to plant the seed, to start the culture, to make it a psychologically safe space that men feels that it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to express your feelings. It really begins with ourselves. And also it sounds to me, based on the sharing, like it also begins in the family, what you are modeling or what you are demonstrating to the children, because they're going to grow up modeling the behavior that they saw you exhibiting. So how can men then activate more of this strength of compassion?
Just a short one, quick one. I would say that it first starts from the self. Because if we can't even be compassionate with ourselves, how can we be truly compassionate with another? Compassion comes from a place of overflow. I would think that ultimately, if you are not compassionate to yourself, or you try to be compassionate to people, it will be flawed. It will be flawed in some sense. You're trying to give what you don't have. So for men to be really able to model this and all that, it has to start with the self first and foremost, and like I said, there are exercises that can be done, like externalizing yourself. If my best friend were in this situation facing these problems, what would I say to him? What would I encourage him to do? And then after that, actually applying that to ourselves. So it has to be internalized in that sense. What about the rest of you? What do you think?
Well, I came across an exercise that was very interesting. I think this was about 2 to 3 years ago, and that's basically you do two different models, and you're doing self-reflection. You can do one with your 10 years from now best version, and you can do one with 10 years ago your younger self, and then you stand in that position and you talk with that image of yours. So, what would that 10 years from now say to you right now on the situation, on the things that you have? What advice would you give to yourself if you were 10 years older? And what advice would you give yourself if you were speaking to a version of you 10 years younger? And I find that to be a very interesting perspective to get us just thinking for a while. Uh, and that I think could probably be a good start, aside from, acknowledging that it has to come from you. I think it also comes from up here. The thoughts that we have are so cluttered with so many things that we want to accomplish that we don't give enough time to really just reflect with ourselves. So that one technique, when I came across, it really got me grounded, gave me a time to think about, hey, you know what? If it's 10 years down the road, how is it going to be like? If I'm at my best self, I'm at that journey that I wanted to be, how would I tell myself right now on how to deal with things? Yeah, so that was a mind-opening one for me.
It sounds familiar, this exercise. Did I do that with you, Joy?
Yes, we do something similar for our strength training. So this is very interesting. I think like writing letter to yourself, whether it's to the small you or to the future you, is a very powerful exercise, and it's something that, well, let's face it, it's not something that we do every day, but it's powerful because you are acknowledging yourself and you are acknowledging. Taking care of the needs of the younger you, perhaps some needs were not met, and you can go there and make that closure. So I think psychologically, it's a very powerful thing because we all need closure in our mind. We need that psychological safety. If we don't have that wounds from our childhood, we carry it forward as an adult, whether you're conscious or unconscious. When you're reactive and you have no idea why you reacted that way, the clues are, the odds are very high from your childhood. You need to address those issues. What is it that you always wanted to hear as a child that nobody ever said anything to you about? You need to go and address that now. So it sounds to me like very interesting. Inner child work is a powerful tool as well for men. I've never seen it that way because it's normally women who's more into therapies like this, doing inner child. Then for men, it's like, hey, what is this, right? But it sounds to me that for those of you who have experienced it, it is equally valid as a powerful healing tool for yourself. So I think for our audience, it's something that perhaps you want to keep an open mind and just experience it and experiment it one time and see how it feels. Because I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter you're male or female. We all been children before. We've all been hurt before as a child and felt unheard, right? Some needs were not met. I think that is a really powerful way to start. Go back and heal those wounds and smash those stories, those limiting stories. Men shouldn't cry. I must not express my feelings. I mean, that's where all the trouble starts, isn't it? It was from childhood. So inner work, writing letter to yourself, I think it's a very simple tools. You don't even need to go to a class for it, let's face it. You can just decide and just write it on your own. But of course, if you want to come for a class, then this is a shameless advertising. Come to my class. I can teach you how to do that. No problem. So either way, my point is you have resources. It's only you taking that step, making that decision. Okay, I'll write that letter. Okay, I really don't know how to do this. I want to be guided. Go for some therapy or go for some help. There's so many resources out there, especially in this pandemic. So many people are stepping up. Organizations are stepping up to support people's mental health. You have no excuse not to take care of your mental health. Even if you're a man and even if you grew up with all these limiting stories that society has pressed upon you, well, awareness is the first piece, and that is the point of having this conversation, because I think it's a much needed conversation. We need more of such conversation for men so that they can come out. Renee Brown says the power is in the labeling. When you can label that shame no longer holds power towards you. So it's not just for women, it's applicable for men as well. If you're angry or if you're feeling sad, to be able to say it and label it, I think that's very liberating, very powerful. So what is it that you need to label so that it no longer holds that control and power over you? We need to do that. We need to have all this open conversation where men can be vulnerable, come together and share their feelings and share tips about how they supported themselves and how plant new ideas for men, because I can imagine if I have no idea what is this self-compassion, it's going to be a very foreign road. You wouldn't know what's the first step to take, because even self-compassion for me was a very foreign concept when I first decided that I want to heal myself after a traumatic relationship. And then I heard this strange thing called self-compassion. I had no clue. Nobody in my family I can relate with self-compassion. What is this? Asian, we don't have this we have a lot of kindness, but it's always outer directed. This inner directed relationship is almost non-existent. We always perceive it with like, oh, Mother Teresa, very far away figure, but no, not applicable to me. My family, everybody scold, right? It's a scolding culture in Asia. Let's face it. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves. Like you say, plant the seeds. Maybe we may not see immediately. Doesn't mean we do it today, then next month we'll see. But hey, if we all do it together, we take responsibility for our own healing, we model the right behavior, we practice self-compassion. I think it's just a matter of time. We plant the seeds of hope for the next generation, so that hopefully in another generation or two generations to come, we will see very different kind of movies where actually it's cool for men to express their feelings, right? To have healthy emotional awareness and management. So I think the responsibility at the end of the day, if we consider that it comes from us, let's start the journey with ourselves. I still think that's a lot to be hopeful for.
I think I just want to follow up on that. The key word I think is awareness, because you can only seek help if you are aware that you need help. So to a lot of men out there, this is what it's supposed to be. I'm okay. This is how it's supposed to be. I don't think I have got an issue. So how do we then get the word out there? To get men to look at themselves and to, because if I don't think there's an issue, right? Whatever I look at it, I mean, I see people going for therapy sessions and said, this can't be me. I don't think I have this problem, but they could have, be having that problem and not realize it, right? So how then do we? Okay, so I think planting the seeds is a way to start, but. How long is it going to take before we get a message out there to men that, look, you need to take a good look at yourself? Is this something you are struggling with, and you don't know that you're struggling with it because you think this is how it's going to be? How many of men are actually exposed to programs like this? Now, every time I come on any show with Joy, I learn so many things, because yeah, honestly, of course, I get into a lot of trouble also getting into programs and stuff, but I do learn, so yeah, I guess that's the payback, but. So awareness is important. How do you get people, get men to look at themselves and say, look, I do have something that needs to be taken care of, to be looked at. I need to speak to somebody to sort this out, because a lot of them think, okay, this is it. This is how it's supposed to be. All right, I'm fine. I don't have a problem.
All right.
Actually, that.
Yeah. No, Kevin, go ahead. Yeah.
I think what Alil is highlighting reminds me of a thought that I also had when I was thinking about the people, especially men who commit suicides. I mean, at some point, they must have lost their self-awareness and chosen that path of suicide. So the question beckons is, before we can exercise self-compassion, how do we help men be more self-aware? I think that's the question that Alil is asking. And Mervin, if you could weigh in on that would be great.
Ultimately, it's about education, psychoeducation. And I mean, that's exactly what we're doing here at Four of Us Guys Enjoy, isn't it? We are talking about these things that people don't talk about. And that's actually where it starts with conversations, to normalize the fact that men cry, that we have emotions, we have feelings, blah, blah, blah. It's why we have ambassadors and all these kind of things, once again, also, right? To come out and say that, hey, these are things that are okay to talk about and all that. And of course, initially people are, what is this about? Why you're talking? I mean, the same thing as the mothers who started that movement for children's suicide also, which is something that a lot of people think suicide is something shameful. As a mother, you have failed as a mother and all that. But instead, they're like, no, we need to talk about these things. We need to bring it into awareness. So the same way I would say that for us men is what we need to do and what we're doing right now. Exactly, we're talking about it, and I hope men who watch this strike a chord with them, and they'll be like, hey, actually these lads, they have a point, and hopefully they'll open that door to them really going into a journey of self-awareness and all that. I mean, the greatest tragedy I always think is that for men, they like to bottle it up, and they bottle until the pressure too strong, then they break. I don't think actually suicide is a lack of self-awareness. There's a hyper-awareness that they are suffering. Or they may be feeling this overwhelming sense of hopelessness and despair. Or sometimes even you could reach a point where, they would do anything to escape the unpleasant reality that they're trapped in. And they resort to suicide, not knowing that there are actually pathways or resources or whatsoever out there that could actually help them. So for us men, I guess it's just as simple as modeling to other men that, hey, it's okay to seek help, it's okay to talk about things, it's okay to cry. Otherwise, how else do you suppose we could reach out to them?
So it
I
seems
I
like
echo on that.
Jeffro, yes, go ahead.
No. I just say I totally agree on that.
So I think there is a degree of, I think, responsibility as well for men to support men to psychoeducate men, like taking care of your kind. And of course women can come in to support men, but I think the men might not accept help from women if they're not ready. So I think based on what I'm hearing with all of you today, my view is that men have to support men first, because some men, they might need that layer before they will open up and accept support from women. Otherwise, because they're still fixed in that stereotype, oh, I must be strong, I cannot show you what I'm feeling. So actually, I really want your help and I really appreciate your concern, but I don't want to show it so much because, oh, I'm taught that it's not cool. So I guess maybe the first piece after awareness is really men picking up that responsibility to keep a lookout and make sure that the men around you are feeling support, and then the woman can come in to further support and enhance that environment, right? Planting the seeds again, right? Coming back to that culture. But I just get a sense, being an Asian woman, that I don't think that all men, because men was just sometimes even good friends, they just brush me aside. Don't worry, I'm fine. But I know you're not fine. How can you be fine? Such a thing happened to you, right? They cannot. They're not ready. They don't have the mindset, the conditioning to be able to accept my help. So, my view is that men probably have to be more proactive and psychoeducate other men, model the behavior. And then hopefully, that energy will spread, that psychological safety will spread, and then women can then come in and further enhance that supportive environment. So this has been an amazing conversation, guys. I love, we really went deep. I think we really went in depth and explored things that you normally would not be able to have in a daily conversation. So I would like to wrap this up with a quick tip from any of you. What is a simple practical tip that you think that you can give to infuse more compassion into daily life? So let's get the men started with some simple ideas or what they can do already right now.
I think from a layperson's perspective, someone who isn't aware of the science behind all these things, the simplest thing you can do is to pick up the phone, call someone, and talk to them. Just don't keep it to yourself. Any friend, I think that is a start, and it can really be if nothing else, just sharing it with someone can really make you feel better, I feel. But of course, a good friend will always be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of that you need help and point you in the right direction. Yeah.
Love it. Simple and to the point.
Yeah. Well, to add that on, and this is also to help the other person, because I feel that this is a very general sentiment that a lot of people would just come in like, do you need help? I have a solution. I can help you right now. Just listen to me. I'm going to tell you. So people may rush into that because we've all been so geared up to giving answers and solution. As someone who is facing any sort of difficulty, you can actually set the context for them, and you can tell them that, hey, you know what, I want to share something, and I just want to hear me out. That's it. Or I want to rant about something. I see this very common among ladies, where they can tell the other person, hey, I just want to rant about something, and then they spend the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes just saying it out, and that's it. But for guys, you would need to be very deliberate in saying that out so that the other person knows. Because, the stereotypical is when we say something, we just want an answer or we want a solution, an idea. So people tend to just jump into that. So letting them know that you just want to talk it out, you want to share something, I think that would be a great start for yourself and the other person.
Leslie.
Yeah, that's good sharing, Adela and Jeffrey. I'm also learning, adding this to my arsenal, my playbox. For me, before I met Joy, I think my solution for myself was Michael Jackson's song, "The Man in the Mirror." So my self-therapy was being really looking at myself in the mirror, sometimes without clothes, sometimes with clothes, and in the mirror. Okay.
You have to say that. I can't imagine that now.
Please do not imagine. I mean, yeah, you may stop imagining now. But I found that to be very therapeutic for myself because I had to get real with myself, and I had the self-talk that I have when I'm not looking in the mirror versus the self-talk that I have when I'm looking at myself in the mirror are two different worlds altogether. And I found it very helpful to actually have that self-talk whilst looking at myself, because that's the real person. There's no one else I'm responsible for except the man in the mirror. After I met Joy and got to understand the world of positive psychology, and then she introduced me to the positive psychology community, it really started opening up my mind to all the tools and wonderful ideas, concepts, science-based research methods and pathways that we have at our disposal. Just that I never knew this existed before I was exposed to the world of positive psychology. I found it I'm 51 years old, but I would say sometimes there are moments where I have a little bit of a midlife crisis. I do not know where I'm headed next for the next leg of my life. So when Joy introduced me to character strengths assessment and strengths profile assessment, I initially I just thought it's another personality test kind of thing, But when I did it and I opened up my mind and I did those earnestly, I actually found that, oh my God, these are my resources that I have within. And there's so much good within that I yet to untap. And that actually gave me a platform to be more self-compassionate, actually, and less hard on myself or less doubtful of myself. So these two tips I would like to share: the man in the mirror, clothed or unclothed, and then also strengths assessments. I think those are wonderful tools.
All right, I think just to wrap things up, because we're already at like 6:05 right now, just two things. Number one, if you are interested to find out more about self-compassion, check out Kristen Neff, Kristen space NEFF. She has done TED Talks. She has a lot of resources out there. So if you like, you can go and check them out. Very wonderful resources, actually. Second part is that to add on top of what everyone else has said, I would say also in terms of look at the kind of people you surround yourself with. What kind of people do you surround yourself with? What kind of friends do you have? In fact, one of my favorite sayings is that if you want to know where you're going to be in 10 years' time, show me the kind of people you hang out with right now. And then if you're going to be hanging out with toxic, negative, hyper-masculine guys, I'm not saying that you avoid them totally, because you still got morals somehow to them, right? But it's just that, you need to feed yourself first. You need to fill yourself up with the right kind of energy, with the right kind of attitudes. So maybe do a bit of a assessment of just what kind of friends are you hanging out with? Are they the kind of friends that you can see, you know, carrying you to a kind of future that you want to go into? Or are they, you know, just kind of like hanging around all the time? When the times are good and when the times are bad, they're going to just like up and disappear. You know, so I think there's another level of working towards the kind of person you want to be. If you want to be self-compassionate, do you hang around with people who put you down all the time? Then it's going to be really hard. You're struggling uphill. Well, obviously it's going to be easier if you hang around with people who, you know, what I like to call your tribe. You know, who kind of have the same belief value systems as you. You build one another up. Then when you're built up already, then we can really look at more. Once again, it has to come from overflow. If you want to influence other men, go out there and be a role model, you need to be strong. You need to be, you know, well put together first before you can even go there. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Like, this is an amazing 1 hour conversation. Everybody feeling good? Yeah, I feel like I've learned so much as well about men with the strength of compassion. I hope that all of us had some takeaway as well, hearing from other people how their struggles and their tips. I think there was lots of very practical tips that you guys dished out. I don't even know if you realize that. I think in our own way, we can be mini expert, and actually maybe that's what we should do, is strive to be a kind of like a mini expert in self-compassion, at least for ourselves, right? That's the least we can do, and that will help with planting the seeds, passing on the culture, and hopefully we can have a kinder and more compassionate society for our children and for the next generation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been amazing, my very first strengths forum with men. So hopefully let's have more men listening in. Hopefully more men can this can spark a conversation for them that it might be the first time that anyone has even talked to them about self-compassion. So let's keep this going, and hopefully we can have more opportunities to do this often as well, to have more such conversation and to help build that culture, that supportive, compassionate culture. So thank you so much for coming on the show. So let's end this show. You guys are professional and like so familiar with the show already. Let's end this show on a high note with our superpower pose. Okay, thank you for coming. Okay, thank you for watching, audience. Okay, take care. Bye.